This is the first in a series of web-based tutorials intended to demonstrate the use of the HOME Cost Allocation Tool. The tool was developed as a supplement to CPD Notice 16-15, which was published in August of 2016 and addresses the allocation of eligible cost and identification of home-assisted units. In addition to reading the notice itself, you can access a webinar titled Allocating Cost in the Home Program, which was held in December of 2016. The recording, transcript, and presentations from that webinar are all available in the HUD Exchange. The cost allocation tool itself can also be downloaded from the HUD Exchange. The tool is a Microsoft Excel workbook that contains a series of interrelated worksheets. It is intended to guide home participating jurisdictions and other program participants through the cost allocation process. This includes selecting the appropriate method of cost allocation and calculating either the required number and type of home units based on the level of home investment, or the cost that can be allocated to a specific set of pre-identified units. As we begin, let's remind ourselves what cost allocation is. Cost allocation is a process by which we assign a project's actual and eligible cost on a unit-by-unit basis. Particularly in large construction projects, a contractor doesn't bid or invoice on a unit-by-unit basis. And even if they could do that, many hard and soft costs are common to the project as a whole and need to be fairly divided among the units. Cost allocation is how we do that. Ultimately, the goal and purpose is to achieve balance between the home funds being invested in a project and the units that will be subject to home's affordability restrictions. The eligible cost of the home designated units must always equal or exceed the home investment in the project. In multi-unit projects, a home PJ can choose to assist the entire project, that is, all of the individual units, or can decide that it will only apply home's affordability requirements to some of the units, while others will be unassisted for home purposes. Anytime a home-funded project includes unassisted units, cost allocation is required to ensure that the program is getting its fair share of affordable units relative to the home investment. There are several regulatory provisions that interact and drive the cost allocation process. First, home funds can only be invested in home-eligible cost, which are defined in Section 92-205(d)(1) of the Home Final Rule. The regulation identifies that only the actual home-eligible cost can be charged to the program, and requires that these costs be determined based on a method of cost allocation. At the same time, a PJ's investment in a given project is limited not just to the actual and home-eligible cost, but Section 92-250A defines a maximum per unit subsidy limit. Those limits are updated periodically and can be obtained from a PJ's assigned HUD field office. Anyone wanting more detail on how those limits are determined should review CPD Notice 15-003. Finally, subsection B of 92-250 also limits a PJ's investment to the gap or need for home funding based on an underwriting and subsidy layering review. In other words, no matter what actual costs are or what the maximum project subsidy limit is, we can never invest more than is necessary to provide quality housing that can be expected to remain viable over time. The cost allocation tool was developed to help standardize and simplify the process. And frankly, because we know that a lot of folks out there don't like math. The tool itself is just a Microsoft Excel workbook that contains a series of different worksheets. The first worksheet, that will be used for every project, guides users to select the appropriate method of cost allocation. The CPD Notice outlines three methods: the standard method, the proration method, and the hybrid method. As a result, the tool includes specific worksheets for each of the methods of cost allocation. However, for any given project, only one method worksheet will be completed. In other words, the cost allocation for each project will include two worksheets: the selection of method sheet and the method-specific sheet. The upcoming segments will dive into these issues in greater detail, but anytime a project's units are not comparable, the standard method of cost allocation must be used. The proration and hybrid methods can only be used if a project's units are comparable. In practice, we expect that most projects will use either the standard method or proration method. As an electronic worksheet, the cost allocation tool does the math for us. That's what computers do, complete mathematical calculations more quickly and accurately than mere mortals can do by hand. But what the tool does not and cannot do is make judgment calls. In order to complete the cost allocation tool, there are two key human judgments that PJs and other users need to make off-sheet or prior to entering the numbers into the tool. First, we need to determine whether or not a project's units are comparable. And second, we need to carefully review a project's cost to distinguish between those that are home eligible and those that are ineligible for home funding. There are 6 additional segments in this series of tutorials. In addition to this introduction, there are segments on the comparability determination, defining comparability and showing practical examples of projects that are not comparable and those that are, delineating home eligible and ineligible cost. This segment highlights key costs that are common and even necessary in most projects, but that cannot be paid for with home funds. From there, we'll dive into the tool itself, showing how to use the selection of method worksheet to identify and choose an appropriate method of cost allocation for your project. And the last 3 segments demonstrate the standard method, the proration method, and finally the hybrid method.